Excuse
Get their attention.
Excuse me. Can everybody please take their seats? We're about to start.
Thank
you.
Yeah, take your seat. Well done.
Yeah, well done.
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. We're going to get going. So thanks a million, everybody, for your presence today. And thanks to this wonderful Presto, wonderful musicians here who welcomed us in and really set us up for what's going to be a fantastic conversation. So I think a Boulabus for the great challenge in the room. So I think, guys, are you going to do something else now? Do you want to come up?
Welcome everybody. My name is Frankie and I'd like to welcome you to St. Dalton's campus today. We're delighted to have you all with the Children's Rights Alliance and fighting for children's rights. It's a tough world for us. We're happy to know you are all in our corner. We will hand you over to Denise Charlton in a moment, but before you start, we just want to tell you about a few things. As you can see, we have an amazing campus that we enjoy every day. It is important to be safe So our fire exits are here, here, over there, and here. And if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way to the nearest exit and no running. We hope you enjoy music entertainment so far. That was our Presto music project. They were brilliant. We are very lucky to have music as part of our days here in St. Dalton's. Music lifts our spirits and makes us feel good. Here is another small piece from Presto just for you today. Oh, weren't they just full of talent? I'd like to introduce you to my two friends, Ruby and Pixie, who'll tell you a little bit more about St. Dalton's.
Hi, I'm Pixie. Hi, I'm Ruby. We couldn't let this opportunity pass while we have you all wonderful people in our amazing campus today. Isn't it amazing? We have a few facts just to give you a little flavour. Did you know St. Dalton's has more than 138 people working here with all sorts of jobs to do? And another fun fact, out of all those staff, 61 are local people from Cherry Orchard and Ballyfermot. How great is that? Did you know we have a massive 21 classes? Did you know we have 2 boards of management, as the one wasn't enough? Our chairperson, Mr. Rory McKinley, and Father Michael are on both to keep us all in line.
As Chef Brian and staff in our kitchen make about 2,000 lovely hot meals each week. St. Dalton's opened in September 2006, so we'll have a big birthday party next year for our 20th.
Did you know we are the only school in Ireland to develop a model of practice called ICE? ICE stands for Integrated Care and Education. And not only ICE, we have a parent partnership framework that supports and includes our parents in our journey and their own journey, so we can learn together.
Look who made the tea today.
As you can see from those amazing presenters, sorry everyone, we are a changemaker school with the DCU. Maybe the flags in the corridor gave it away. As changemakers, we have 4 pillars: empathy, creativity, leadership and teamwork. Watch our seat, government ministers. We are the leaders of tomorrow.
Did you know we have performed at the National Concert Hall with our Presto Music Project, and just as you heard, they are amazing. The Presto Music Project is another part that makes St. Ultan's so different. Where else would you get music lessons as a part of your school day? Music lifts the spirit of everyone.
Some people think St. Ultan's is simply a school. How wrong are they? St. Ultan's is a campus. It's open all year round and includes early years education, primary school, care service, play therapy, nurture programme, and our fantastic Presto Music Project, parent programmes, summer camps, and we host loads of community activities and lots more. Our day doesn't just stop at 2:30. Some of us go on to club for more activities and fun.
Thanks to lots of fundraising, we have our own play therapy here on our campus. Sometimes it's just good to talk things out. Also, we have our very own therapy dog called Griffin who comes in a few times a week. He helps us out too. He's the cutest therapist on campus.
Did you know St. Ultan's is a hub in Cherry Orchard? We are involved in lots of things that help our community: cherry blossom festivals, fun family days and barbecues, St. Patrick's Day parades and so much more. Sure, we were even on RTE. Did you know that St. Ultan's is a very special place that is like no other campus in the country? And did you know we are so proud of this fact? And one more thing before you start, we have a spectacular song for you with Major Ashland. They're going to sing This Is Me from The Greatest Showman.
Not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. But I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are your wanna cut me down. I'm gonna send the blood, gonna drown them out. I ain't brave, I ain't bruised, I ain't who I'm meant to be. This is me. So now, 'cause here I come, and I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen, I make no apologies. This is me. gonna drown them out. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be, this is me.
And now I will hand you over to our chairperson, Mrs. Denise Charlton.
So I have to say I'm a little bit nervous following these amazing young women and that fantastic musical talent. The only thing I can do is promise not to sing. But anyway, isn't this just an amazing place to be? A demonstration of what we're going to talk about now. And I wouldn't say future leaders, I would say absolute leaders. The presidential election, I'll be looking forward to now seeing your names in the ring in years to come. So well done, everybody. Really fantastic. So welcome to everybody. As I say, we're here this morning at St. Ultan's to really think about ending child poverty. It's the End Child Poverty Week run by the Children's Rights Alliance and its members, and obviously the focus today is on education. So delighted as Community Foundation. Our mission is equality for all in thriving communities, and we've been a long-standing partner of the Children's Rights Alliance. Nobody needs to tell people in the room the challenges that poverty presents for kids and the chance that some of our children have the phase equality for all. It's much more equal for some kids than it is for others. And so we try and unpack how we can make education a contributing factor to that equality. And then even within education, how do we make the playing field fair? And the DESH school system is obviously something that's up for discussion this morning, and it offers opportunities. We have an amazing panel that are going to, I suppose, highlight the impact of the system, the DESH school system and programmes, how that can make a difference in the lives of children, in their educational outcomes, but actually now the learning from that and how we can improve on it. And that's now, as you know, in the programme for government. As always, the Children's Rights Alliance bring us together with intention, and obviously it's a month before budget. There is the Government Child Poverty Summit tomorrow, and so really trying to focus on what is the learning, what are the opportunities, and then what are the specific asks for that budget, and how we can really try and make sure that that's on the political agenda. I think the ask is about 10 million for 9 pilots, but Tanya will talk a little bit more about that. But really, really focusing on the opportunities that we need to provide, how we try and disrupt intergenerational poverty, and how we really give these wonderful children demonstration of what an amazing physical school, but it's not just the physicality of the school, obviously the talent. As Frankie said, I think having music as a part of your day and your lives and the opportunity that offers, how it engages with the community, that it's a campus and not just a school. So we're seeing before us live what the model should look like, and we're going to hear from experts on how we should be improving on that model, really to give children an equal chance. All right, so I'm going to invite, first of all, the Assistant Principal Officer from the Department of Education and Youth up. We're delighted to have Micheál Killalea with us. Obviously, he's going to tell us a little bit more about the thinking and the thought of the department, but it's also fantastic to have him here listening to all the experts, and I'm sure he knows them well. So Micheál works across a number of government departments over the last 20 years, and the last of the 8 years have been working with the Social Inclusion Unit in the Department of Education and Youth, and really thinking about and developing policy and implementing that policy to tackle educational disadvantage. He was the National Coordinator of the OECD Education for Inclusive Society Project Review of Resourcing School to address educational disadvantage in Ireland. His current work is on the development of the DESH Plus scheme, drafting the new DESH plan, and he's going to talk to us today about the Department of Education and Youth's their long-term strategic plan to improve the outcomes for children and young people at risk of educational disadvantage in all schools, and it's great to have somebody like Micheál rooting for the opportunities and the recommendations we want as we come towards the budget.
Thanks very much, Denise, and thanks very much, firstly, to the Children's Rights Alliance for the invitation to speak here today. I think we've worked kind of well together over the last number of years, and this is always a really good event to bring attention to, the pressing needs that I suppose that we're all kind of advocating as we head towards budget time. I mostly want to say thank you to the guys just heading out the door. I think they were absolutely excellent, super hosts, and I think there were actually credit. I was almost going to say credit to the school, but it's definitely credit to the campus here in terms of what it is, and especially the music from the Presto music group and the wonderful choir. I think it's a really great energy in the morning to get us all going for the discussion that lies ahead. It's been really good to get a tour of this campus here today. It's an excellent setup. You can really see the people who work here are really committed to it, and it really shows kind of how what can be done. As I said to Sue here earlier, they've been great in terms of invitations to the department. Unfortunately, today was the first day I got to get here, so it's been great to get around and see the excellent work that goes on. So I suppose in terms of where we are in our work, I suppose the DESH programme has been around actually as long as St Ultan's, almost 20 years now. We now support almost 1,200 schools with an additional support of 180 million annually. I suppose, and that provides additional support such as staffing, funding, access to the Homeschool Community Liaison Scheme and the School Completion Programme, which aims to kind of support schools with the highest concentrations of educational disadvantage, and that's in terms of supporting children who are at risk of educational disadvantage to have the same opportunity as their peers, the more affluent peers in other schools. These supports are on top of, I suppose, the additional supports, the universal supports that are across the system, which we've aimed over the last number of years to enhance, to kind of provide that basic need. So in terms of your free school books, the free school meals, and reducing the class sizes as best we can over the last number of budgets. But I think still there's that emphasis in terms of making sure that we're supporting those schools that have the highest concentrations of children who are at risk of educational disadvantage has been a major priority for us in terms of, really, I suppose we always use the term closing the gap, but making it an equal playing field, as Denise mentioned there earlier on. So it's part of an overall approach of the department to ensure that there's an equal playing field. And I suppose we often use the DESH programme as our main policy lever, but we do also have, and a lot of my colleagues today are at, we have the Travel Roma Education Strategy Forum, and that follows on from where we introduced our Travel Roma Education Strategy last year, which aims to support Travel Roma children and young people through education. We also have, I suppose, introduced some incremental changes in the last couple of years, such as introducing the Counselling in Primary Schools pilot, which is aimed to see can we evaluate how counselling provided in school to inform our future policy in that area as well. And I suppose some of the schools who are likely to be in sort of the DESH Plus scheme are some of those who have been supporting that, and I suppose we will be evaluating that over the coming year to see how that might influence or shape policy in that space in the future. So I suppose as I was driving here today, I was kind of, in my head was the report yesterday from the SRI about how 1 in 5 children and young people are at risk of poverty. and how that figure was the same as it was in 2007, 2008, which I suppose that kind of got we going anywhere. And I suppose it is that piece of thinking, like, is there scenarios where there are some of those children who were in that category in 2007, 2008, their children now are, there, and we have that intergenerational piece that is carrying on, and how can we affect that? And inevitably, I suppose, if we've looked at developing the DASH Plus scheme, we see that where there is that higher concentration, it is more difficult to break that cycle. There is, unfortunately, the outcomes are poor in terms of academic outcomes, in terms of literacy and numeracy when we have our large-scale international assessments, attendance and retention, and the progression onwards into higher and further ed. I suppose then, as I was thinking about that, I was reminded that last week at the DASH Advisory Group, I got given out to by someone that I'm being a bit negative, and maybe we need to celebrate that. There is some progress that we can make when we do all work together and make that change for people, and that over the course of the DASH program, over the course of the last 20 years, there has been some really positive changes. There has been a real increase in the number of children and young people who are getting to achieve the Leaving Cert and then progress on. That gap between the non-DASH schools and the DASH schools has halved from 16% when it began to around 8% currently, and we keep driving now through the new DASH plan and over the next number of years to get that to be an even playing field as well. We've also, in terms of even looking at literacy and numeracy outcomes, we are, even despite COVID, the DASH schools held their own, which completely went against the international trends. Even within that, and I think it's a piece I keep emphasising because I don't hear it enough, in the urban Band 1 schools, there was an increase in high achievers. And I think we really need to celebrate that there is some progress being made, and we keep learning from how that has happened and how can we kind of continue to develop that. But it is the case, I suppose, to think, as we've learned from, as I mentioned, the OECD review, which we carried out over the last couple of years, what they found was, while we have made that significant progress over the years, there is still a cohort, there is still, in terms of children and young people from really kind of intergenerationally disadvantaged areas who are experiencing disadvantage on a daily basis, travel and roaming young children as well, for whom that gap is still there, where we haven't really made enough of a dent, where we have to redouble efforts and take the learning from what has worked and see can we kind of develop that further. And I suppose that is where Conor, who's here, who's been kind of engaging with us over the last couple of years, really at this point, looking at the development of a DASH Plus scheme and how can we really focus more on those schools who have the highest concentrations of children from those sort of backgrounds, who really, that we can really. And what we see is it's untapped potential. It's children there who can really, as we see here today, current leaders, not even future leaders, who are hugely capable, and we can offer that little bit more support that can offer the schools that opportunity to do that. So where we have been over the last, I suppose, taking the learnings from the OECD review, so their thoughts were similar to mine as I came up to them forward today, that we are making progress, but they set out a number of recommendations that we can do to kind of make that progress more for that cohort. And a key part of that is building capacities within schools in terms of supporting teachers with the teaching and learning, but also building capacity around schools. And it's working with the other services, working with our colleagues across other departments, having all that working together around the school. I mean, here is really the utopia. If we could ever get to it for everywhere would be super. But even if we can tap into those that are around the school and have that kind of support system. What we have done, as was in the department, we began that work with an interdepartmental group on addressing education disadvantages, where we've been kind of, I was going to say dragging our cows, but actually no, they're quite willingly coming from other departments, the Department of Rural and Country Development, Children, DFERRIS, and there is an appetite there, I think, to kind of see what we can do in terms of linking us together to support children, and then within that support education, and using education as that tool to break the cycle of education disadvantage. And I think there's a real positive piece in terms of doing that. I know someone said to me one day when I was kind of quite frustrated, I felt we were getting nowhere, and they said, for each one child you can make a difference. There's a ripple effect, because they can affect their community, that they influence their community by having succeeded and progressed, and then they go and affect the next generation, their own children. They have the capacity to support them and support those below them. So I think each bit we do, I think that there's a real piece that we keep kind of driving on this. In terms of, I suppose, in terms of where we are in our progress at the moment, which I think will be probably quite in terms of developing the Dash Plus scheme. When the new government was formed, obviously part of the programme for government set out that there would be the development of the Dash Plus scheme, which is, I think, was definitely welcome for us in terms of we have a lot of work done, background work done to date on that. And I suppose that redoubled effort for how we would seek into kind of creating the case as we come into these coming weeks. We've set up, we took a student-centered design approach to that. So we have an approach which involves making sure the students' needs, the children and young people's needs, are at the centre of how we design that scheme. And to do that, we developed a Dash Plus advisory group which brought together principals, homeschool community liaison coordinators and school completion programme coordinators across a selection of schools that would be likely in that category to inform us of the experiences they see on the daily basis, the experiences of children and young people in their schools. I'm looking at both primary and post-primary. And that has been really, it's been hugely informative. Together with, over the last couple of years, we've also done a huge amount of consultations across the country, meeting with school staff, school leaders, parents. Actually, we've had 2 rounds of engagement with children and young people, which we have really central to this. And actually, last week we had our children and young people consultation on developing the Dash Plus piece. And all of that information comes into the mix in terms of making it really clear for us what those needs are within those schools. We then work with the design group over the last period towards the end of the school year, kind of refining down those needs, then ideating potential solutions from what they experience in schools, and then bring into what the priorities are, which has allowed us to really shape a kind of good picture as we head into the current period where we are now. I suppose what we've come through quite strongly on that, and which I'm sure you're kind of quite familiar if you're working in schools in this area, is in terms of the impact of trauma and intergenerational trauma in children, and that's probably a key part. And I think Conor will probably talk even about that later, but it has been very strong that has come through in that group, and it's something that we are trying to prioritise within that. The sustainable funding for those schools, because the imagination and the creativity and the ability of those schools to find ways to do initiatives to support the children, it has been immense. But it does take up a lot of time when you have to apply for money each year, so that's been a key part that we're looking at as well. Looking at kind of the staffing in terms of ensuring that there is supports there to link with the community. And then that other piece that I mentioned earlier is having those services around the community working with the school. They're kind of the 4 main areas that have come through that we've been kind of building towards. We're in a position where currently, it's a tricky part where we're advocating as best we can. Minister McEntee, as you've all known, has said on a number of occasions that she will be introducing a Dash Plus scheme as part of the Dash plan. So she is also in that position where recently she is advocating as best she can in terms of the upcoming budget. You'll also probably hear is the same day that report was published. IFAC were also publishing or announcing their piece around the finances. But again, I suppose we've put our best foot forward and we continue to kind of advocate for that. And I'm sure there are others who will be doing the same. But I think the key thing is we're also publishing a Dash plan, which sets out our long-term strategy over the next number of years to how we aim to tackle educational disadvantage. So it won't be and within that, the Dash Plus scheme will be a key action. So we'll be making sure that whatever we will aim to get as much as possible done as soon as possible, but ensuring that it still remains part of a long strategic plan for the department to ensure that we are supporting children and young people who are experiencing intergenerational disadvantage to have the same opportunities as their peers. That it's part of the overall piece of when we are looking at how we are supporting schools, we're making sure that this is where we can make our priorities pieces, that we're making sure that children at risk of educational disadvantage are being supported throughout the next coming years. The key piece, I suppose, for us as we head into this piece now, though, is, I suppose, keeping to kind of put that part forward. And I suppose we aim towards into this year, once we kind of get past the budget period, that we'll be kind of have more clarity on where we are in terms of the Dash Plus, but also in terms of where we can be in terms of our Dash plan. And I think the Dash plan is, while Dash Plus is hugely important, couched within that Dash plan is also it's also key that it is couched within that whole longer strategic piece, that we make sure it remains on the agenda as we move forward, that it's and that will be our key part in terms of how we do that we're supporting those at the highest risk and also those across the system. And I think I would say is thanks for you all. Many of you here, I'm sure, have contributed to what we have done over the last couple of years. I'm sure we'll hear you'll be kind of advocating on that support as well, and we'll continue to kind of engage throughout the coming years as we do this as well. So I'm looking forward to the debate and the discussion here, as this will add to what we're doing so far. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to this.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Million. Thanks, Micheál. So that's great to hear about the appetite. Great to hear that the Minister is committed to the programme for government. If anybody has the interest, you might help the Minister by getting this debate out further. It's hashtag End Child Poverty Week, hashtag Children's Budget. And obviously Children's Rights Alliance will be communicating the key messages from here, but she'll be internally trying to advocate for this in the programme for government, so all the help she can get, I think, will increase the chances of a positive outcome. So if you can, tweet away, please do. And I think Tanya and Brendan are in drive time later, and there's been lots of really positive publicity, so that's great. Micheál mentioned the DES Plus advisory group and celebrating some of the impacts that the scheme has had so far, and I won't repeat what he's already said. Probably is always good to celebrate and to mark the impact where there has been a positive impact, and then to see where we go next on that. And we have an amazing panel now that are going to do just that for us, really tell us what's happening. And I was very struck when Micheál was talking about really the untapped potential and ensuring that we're giving an equal chance for capability. And I think we saw a great demonstration of talent when it's given a chance. So I'm going to invite the panel now to come up here. So on the panel joining us is Brendan Goggin, who's the principal of this wonderful campus. And he is one of the campus managers of the Integrated Care and Education Campus, serving Cherry Wood community in Dublin 10. In his role, he oversees the school operations while working closely with the wider educational and care services on campus. His leadership is rooted in inclusivity, collaboration, a vision, and ensure every child has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential. I suspect that's only a minuscule of what Brendan does, and there are longer bios in your event pack, so I'm not going to do the justice, but you'll get a flavour of some of the things that the man does, I'd say, in his day in this campus. Conor McCarthy, principal of the Tallaght Community National School. Conor McCarthy is a principal, as I said, of Tallaght Community National School in Jobstown. Conor is a member of the IPPN DES Advisory Group, the DES Plus Design Advisory Group, and is a member of the West Tallaght Ballymun DES Principal Groups. He holds a Master's in Poverty and Inclusion from DCU, a Diploma in Social Justice from UCD, and a Diploma in Law and Education from King's Inn. Obviously that school doesn't keep him busy enough at all, because he's plenty of time to study and increase his academic knowledge. But again, I don't quite know how he does that, but it'll just give an indication of the expertise that you're going to hear from now. Michael Gillespie is the General Secretary of the Teachers Union of Ireland, and he's been in that role since August 2020. For 25 years he was a teacher of physics, science and maths in St Brendan's Community School in Birr. A union activist throughout his teaching career, he held several TUI elected offices and has been a senior official with the union since 2013. As people in the room will probably know, TUI represents over 20,000 members in second level schools, colleges and centres of further education and adult education, and institutes of technology and technological University Dublin. And then finally, last but not least, Tanya Ward, who will be known to everybody in the room. Tanya is the Chief Executive of the Children's Rights Alliance since 2012. Previous to that, she was Deputy Director at the Irish Council for Civil Liberties, where she worked for 8 years. She also a former lecturer in human rights in TCD and UCD School of Justice. She was the former chair of the National Advisory Council for Children and Young People, and she's currently a member of the Young Ireland Advisory Council. She's the president of Eurochild, and she's a member of the Senior Cycle Delivery Programme. That's just in the educational context. So again, only giving a small indication of the roles and expertise that Tanya had. So I'm going to open the discussion, having heard from the department on the purpose of the DESH scheme and the ambition and the appetite to introduce DESH Plus, just to get a panel's view on the positive impact on DESH so far. So what do you think the impact has been in a positive sense, and just where you think it's falling short? And Brendan, I'm going to start with you. And Micheál has his pen out, which is a good sign.
Yeah, we're on. So my thoughts on the DESH programme. Yeah, well, I love the DESH programme. I think it's absolutely amazing. It's such a massive aim to have, to deliver equality. It's such a massive statement and a massive, massive undertaking. But I suppose it has fallen short. A lot of great work has been done. You look at the schemes like the Homeschool Community Liaison Scheme is a fantastic, an amazing scheme, internationally recognised. The School Completion Scheme as well, the same. Fantastic schemes, and all of the efforts in increasing the outcomes for our children in literacy and numeracy have been fantastic. Where is it falling short? I suppose it's fallen short in how it's been resourced. Some of the things that I would be kind of thinking for DESH 2 were included in reports as far back as 1997. So what we're going to say here today probably isn't that new, but it does need to be resaid and be retold. Some of the great advances in education, of funding in education, like our free book scheme and our free meals programme, are fantastic. They're now universal programs, which is great, but kind of what that has happened, and again, I know this is what DESH Plus wants to address, but perhaps it should have happened in tandem with those changes. Those universal changes have kind of, and including bringing more DESH schools into the fold, has meant that the schools that are most disadvantaged are, when you look at it, the equality is, the levels of equality is getting further apart rather than closer together across the board. The example I kind of give is the free book scheme, and as the original pilot included €96 per student for the free book scheme, which was fantastic, and in the first year of the rollout universally, it was again €96, which was fantastic. The following year that had dropped down to €80 per student. So that meant with the universal introduction of the free book scheme, St Ultan's was less well off by €16 per student. So these are kind of just some of the examples. Universal improvements are fantastic. DESH Plus needs to happen quickly. We kind of, I think, when we see mention of pilot, I think a lot of people shudder. And I know we spoke before, Micheál, things have to happen step by step. But when we hear pilot, I worry. Those maybe who are included in the pilot will worry less. But we say, yes, there's DESH Plus. Yes, this is a pilot, but there are other things that need to be addressed. You know, we need to be properly resourced. We need to be able to let our fantastic staff of educators and school leaders worry less about the unit price of electricity and gas, but focus on literacy and numeracy, successful outcomes and the well-being of the children in our care.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Conor, I'm going to ask you to respond to the same question.
Yeah, so I would echo what Brendan said there about the formal supports that are within the DESH programme that have been really helpful. The HSCL, SCP, the lower pupil-teacher ratio, meals in schools, ensuring that children aren't coming to school and remaining hungry throughout the day, and the free book scheme. Those are the formalised things, but I think the real success of DESH over the last 20 years has been in the things that aren't formalised, like Micheál talked about, in the creativity and in the problem solving that every DESH primary school has engaged in since then. So DESH schools, I think, by and large, when you compare them to DESH schools, now I wasn't there, I'm only 33, but actually, am I 34? I don't know. But 20, 30, 40 years ago, they were perhaps less calm than they are now. They were less inclusive. They were, not as happy places as they are now. When you walk around St. Dalton's, when you walk around my school, when you walk around most DEIS schools, like Michal said, the retention, the attendance has improved significantly. Children from the area are attending there, and not only are they attending, but they're able to access education. And staff within DEIS schools, teachers and SNAs and secretaries and caretakers have a far better understanding now, and it's true of everyone in the education sector, of neurodivergence, of trauma, and the effect that it has on a child's ability to access education than we did 15, 20 years ago. And that's because the world moves on and things improve. And because of that better understanding, we're better able to understand what we aren't able to deliver to them. So we can't give them the therapeutic supports that they need in schools, and they're not getting that from the HSC, they're not getting that from the primary care centre. We can't deliver, well, we can deliver, but we're doing it by robbing from our support teaching, trauma-informed nurture practices that we know come before accessing literacy and numeracy. A child cannot be present in the classroom, cannot take part in the lesson unless they are in a place where they're feeling loved and cared for and listened to. And what we hope and what we've been asking for as part of DEIS Plus is recognition that our understanding has improved, and with that understanding we need staffing supports, so additional teachers, additional SNAs. We need multidisciplinary teams on site in schools, OTs, speech and language therapists, counsellors, working not just with teachers and staff anymore, but working one-to-one with children to deliver therapeutic supports that will allow them to function and to exist and be present in their classrooms. And I think that it's really important that it's, the work that Michal has done is recognised, and the work the Department of Education and Youth has done over the last couple of years is recognised. Like, it is a stated goal of Michal Martin, it's a stated goal of Helen McEntee that they want to introduce DEIS Plus. The OECD has, crunched the numbers. The boys doing the data have done the data on it, and the argument is there for it now. What we are waiting for now is for a politician with the courage and the bravery to pull the trigger on DEIS Plus and to make it transformational. We don't need some other half-assed, kind of weak, mealy-mouthed, we couldn't get enough money, we can't get the money from deeper for this delivery of a DEIS Plus that doesn't go all the way and doesn't deliver what the children that are in schools right now need. So there's massive opportunity there for Michal Martin and for Helen McEntee to show us in education, to show the Irish public writ large, to show everyone that the Irish state is still capable of actioning change when it wants to, and not that we have become so impotent as a government and as a country that even when our Taoiseach, our Minister for Education, want this to happen, that we're not able to do it. It would be a very poor reflection on where we are as a country in relation to education, but would also depress you in relation to housing and healthcare and our ability to affect change there as well.
Great, thanks. Michael?
Yeah, unfortunately I'm a lot older than Conor, so I do remember DEIS coming into schools the first day, so a long time ago. But I suppose the first thing I'd like to, and I'm not normally in agreement with the department, but I'd have to say that DEIS does make a difference. It has made a difference in a lot of our schools in the ETB sector, our community and comprehensive sector. It is now spread into certain schools in the voluntary sector as well. So, and it does make a difference. We did a joint, coming up to the 20th anniversary, we sponsored an independent think tank to do research on it, which basically said that it does make a difference. But obviously then, like all research that we do, it also gave 10 things that we needed to do afterwards. I'm not going to share that with you, but there's always contradictions in the system. So for example, I was lucky enough to teach in a community school. Community school means it's the only school in the town. So we take every student. We're not competing with anybody. We take everybody, the high achievers, the people coming from all sorts of disadvantaged areas. Our feeder schools were DEIS schools. We did not have DEIS status. We didn't have a homeschool liaison. Why? Because there was a point system, and we were just above the point system because we were busing people in from very well-off agricultural areas surrounding us. That sort of kind of stuff is what created a lot of the problems. Now, we still got on well, but what did we depend on? We depended on, like the whole of the Irish education system depends on, volunteerism. We depend on the good relationships that teachers have with their students, how hard they're going to work, what extra they're going to give in their own time. We also depend on what parents are going to give. I mean, voluntary contributions, things like that, which should be outdated in a modern Irish situation. What we saw here today, you could see it, you could feel it. It was about the relationship between the teachers and the pupils. That's what, you know, and I have to point out Mr. Polo, his performance was unbelievable. But that could only happen because he was encouraged by some teacher. So it all comes down to relationships. If we want those relationships, we have to change the way we're thinking. We are bottom of the OECD countries, confirmed yesterday by the OECD, in investment. If we look at the countries that are trying to come into the OECD, we are second to the bottom in that group as well in terms of investment. Only Romania is below us. And yet we're one of the richest countries in Europe in terms of our GDP. Something's wrong there. We have to start investing more in education if it's going to make a difference. And it does make a difference. DESH does make a difference. We're involved in senior cycle redevelopment at the moment. And what we're afraid of, you may have heard us say it, we're afraid of that. And as a union, and our members absolutely believe in senior cycle redevelopment. We believe in additional assessment components. We believe in spreading the burden over the time and all those things. But you can't do it if you don't have investment in it. So we've got free books now. Maybe we should have been also looking at free devices into schools. I mean, the fact that everything we're going to do for the senior cycle is going to be based around how good IT you have. Every school in the country has broadband to their front door. That's a fact. The National Broadband did that. But when you go inside the door, there's a massive difference. If you were in a greenfield school that was built 2 years ago, state-of-the-art, cloud technology. If you were built 10 years ago, you're already out of date. If you were built 20 years ago, it depends on how much the principal could put aside to build this or build that. We have an unequal system for a variety of reasons. And that's the core of our problem, inequality. And we have to be very careful with the senior cycle that we don't go backwards in terms of advantage on advantage and disadvantage on disadvantage. Yes, the changes are exciting. Yes, they are good changes, but they cannot create disadvantage. We've got to start looking at different ways of doing things to do exactly what TAS said DESH has done. It's the ripple effect that Micheál says. We are making a difference in people's lives with DESH, but not enough of them. It's great that we've got 93% people staying in schools, sometimes because they feel safe and happy in schools. But what's about the other 7%? What about the people in, who we lose because they just have nowhere else to go? We also represent third level teachers and teachers in further ed. Whatever supports we have in second level, they completely disappear when you go into tertiary education, further education, or local third level. Depending on the college, the university you go to, it's hit and miss. Somebody is very good at this, somebody's very good at that. There's no national policy. So how are we going to support what we'll call a DESH student, one of our successes in DESH, to go further, to get into an apprenticeship? Do they have, I more than likely know a man in a van. If my daughter, and I've only daughters, wanted to become an apprentice, anything, I more than likely had the contact to do that, social contact. How does someone who doesn't have that contact do something they can do good at? So we've got to start changing the way we look at things and give advantage, and I'm using that word, give advantages to people so that they can overcome those things. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say on that. So.
Thank you.
Not much really to add, but I thought I'd just start with one or 2 points from our own reflections in the Children's Rights Alliance on the DESH Plus programme. Just to kind of echo what has been said around the success of it, it's pretty clear in terms of attendance rates, for example. Attendance rates increased from 16, so let's say for children not attending, the retention rates increased from 16.8% down to 8.4%. So that was really significant in holding on to children within the school body. And we've seen in research that we've commissioned, particularly in the area of child homelessness, it was actually research funded by the Community Foundation, that the DESH schools are much more able to deal with these complex situations. So whereas the non-DESH schools said, I've got no homeschool liaison officer, I'm trying to help families at 9 o'clock at night when I'm finished the school day, I don't have any resources to help these children who are arriving to school late. The DESH schools had a homeschool liaison officer who was able to help families find accommodation, or they could buy a bean bag where children could sleep on it if they've been spending all their time travelling across the city, or they had money to basically buy a school uniform for the child that was arriving to school in dirty clothes. So it's meant that the schools are much more resilient and able to deal with some of the more serious social problems in our society. And apart from the overall rates that are telling us success, we actually see it in everyday life, in public life. Like Senator Eileen Flynn has told us, you know, what was really significant for her in her career was having a homeschool liaison officer. She turned the dial for her and pointed her in the direction of university and opportunity. And we can see consistently the difference that having people from all communities makes, and when they all get to reach their full potential. I suppose where we are now is the question around investment, and I have to say I'm utterly frustrated at the underinvestment in the education system, because the OECD has said, right, they've looked at education systems across the OECD region. They say the best public investment of money is in education. The return to society and to the economy and to the communities is so high, it's the best place where we can put our money. And I think one of the problems for when you talk to people within education who are trying to get it properly funded, it's very complex for them, because our Department of Education is very centralised. So they have to pitch for things like school buildings, staff, as I did that today. Right. As well as all the policy interventions. In other countries that wouldn't happen. It would be a local municipality that would be pitching for things like school buildings. So we haven't recognised what's special about the education system in Ireland, that the Department of Education is pitching for a lot more than other countries would have to pitch for. The other thing that's really significant is the public support. Consistently, when the public are polled on this, they say they want, and I think the answer to ending poverty is actually investing in education. So it's what the public wants. So why are the politicians not making the decision to make these kinds of investments? I thought it was really interesting, Conor, and how you finished on political will, and it was actually political will that created the DESH programme in itself. If you talk to Noel Dempsey, who was Minister for Education, he says when he arrived into education, he wants to do something really significant. And he says to this day, it's the most important thing he did in his whole career, is creating the DESH programme. And when Norma Foley went in as Minister for Education, their vision was to expand the programme. This thing that they feel very passionate about, this programme, they want to expand it. So I think we're in a good place, to be honest, because I do feel that Taoiseach, Helen McEntee and others are very dedicated to the expansion of this programme. But I am a bit frustrated about who is pulling the purse strings, because when you have all this support across government for a programme like this, we're not seeing it across government. And I do feel sometimes on the deeper finance end, I do feel that they are interfering a bit in policy development by not making the right investments and making smart investments. And it's pretty clear DESH is one of the best things we've done as a country. But looking at where we are now with the programme, it's also clear that we're asking the schools to do too much without enough resources and money. They are dealing with recessionary levels of child poverty, right? The Great Recession we had in Ireland, we have the same number of children now in that level of poverty when you take account of housing costs. We are dealing with an ongoing housing crisis where parents are really struggling with high rents, and that means that they are not able to put food on the table because they are paying, Daft is saying rent is now, in Q1, the average rent in Ireland is €2,000 this year. Who can afford that? you know what's happening for families. They're either in homeless accommodation, they're barely holding on, or they're doubling up, or they're living in overcrowded situations. That has a big effect on parents and children trying to live through that situation. We're also dealing with organised crime gangs out there in the ether trying to exploit our children as well on the sidelines. These are all the problems that parents and children and schools are trying to cope with in our society at the moment. But we're not giving schools all the tools that they could use at their disposal to address all these social problems for children and young people. So this vehicle gives us a real opportunity to do something really innovative, but it has to be transformational. The ministers are all saying the right thing. They've created a unit in the Department of Taoiseach, but the only thing you might say is they're tinkering a bit with some of the programmes. If you take income and welfare payments, for example, they have not made significant increases that could be transformational to families at home. They did it during COVID, they could do it again. They haven't they have made investments in education, but to be honest, we need far more into the education system. It's some of the education system is ailing at the moment. There's a massive issue around school buildings. There's a massive issue in terms of holding on to staff. And there's a massive issue in not investing in lots of under-resourced communities. Some communities have really benefited, and some have been failed. And there's some of the things on the table for the government in this budget.
Thanks, Tanya. Brendan, I'm going to come back to you. Tanya has very articulately painted the picture, I suppose, of what children are trying to navigate out there, you know, the additional needs, the additional barriers for them. But here, I mean, you've gone to a lot of trouble around the physical space here. You know, you've got to a lot of trouble to ensure that the children that are here are reaching their potential. So it's just to get a sense from you about that uniqueness. What do you do here in the confines of the present DEIS that we should hear about?
Absolutely. Well, it wasn't me personally. That's where I think we need to start. The people, the visionaries who set up St. Ultan's were ahead of their time. I think today we'd call them solution focused. At the time, they were just very, very stubborn people. They could see a need in Cherry Orchard for education. So this was green fields. There were people working in the community here who said Cherry Orchard needs a school. The naysayer said, should the schools down in Ballyfermot? And yes, there were schools down in Ballyfermot that the children could go to or not go to. Not go to, which was the case. Will I try like that? Or, yeah. Don't, okay. So they could go to or not go to, as was often the case. The people involved at the time, the community came together. They said they needed a school in Cherry Orchard, but not just a school in Cherry Orchard, a school for Cherry Orchard that met the needs of the people. And those people were ahead of their times, because we were discussing earlier on, we're now all talking about things need to be context driven. These people were context driven in their thinking even at that time. So they insisted upon getting the school that they needed, going as far as, and maybe this may be something we need to do, but a sit-down protest on the main road in Ballyfermot. So that they were the ends that people went to make sure that they got the school in Cherry Orchard that they needed. They insisted upon having the social care service, which is part of St. Ultan's. They saw the need for continuity, so the early years service. So at the moment we take children from under 12 months, which was quite unique in services at the moment, to their toddlers, wobblers, ECI 1 and 2. Into primary school, the icing on the cake then is that social care service, the club, where a team of social care workers are available to 50 plus targeted children during the school day and after the school day, which is probably the magic, you know, that there are these services attached to schools, nearby schools, but the fact that they're in the school. And then the magic happens when you have early years practitioners, primary school educators and social care workers working together to solve the problems that these children and families are facing. And it's that synergy is the magic in St. Ultan's. So that's kind of where the space comes from. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
I'm going to go back to you, Conor, now, and you've articulated very clearly the kind of ambition that you would have for the DEIS Plus and why. I think the figure earlier on was 47% of children experiencing trauma, so that's also what schools are trying to support. So if you were to paint the picture of the emotional and the psychological based direct supports in an educational setting that DES Plus should be thinking about, what might they look like and what might they involve?
Yeah, so I suppose that 47% number might come from, I'm part of a group of principals from West Tala, Ballymun and Darndale who've been working together for a good number of years, and in early 2024 we did a survey of there's 30 schools in our group and 20 responded, just trying to get a picture of what the profile of the children and the families within our school was, to try and kind of crystallize it a little bit. And what emerged is a picture that is in our schools of a disproportionate level of children who have experienced trauma or have some kind of additional need or neurodivergence. And I suppose the link between childhood trauma and neurodivergence or additional needs is far more understood now. To put a point on it, like when we talk about like those traumas, like we ask principals to measure direct trauma. So we were talking about any kind of abuse, bereavement, substance abuse. We were talking about violence, crime that children themselves had experienced, not just that had been adjacent to their family, but had happened within their family or within their family home. So you're looking at 47% of the children within each classroom having experienced those direct traumas and needing some kind of support. That has a knock-on effect then to the number of children requiring support teaching within our schools, whether it's academic or social or emotional or behavioural. You're looking at something like between 50% and 75% of a class may need some sort of one-to-one intervention, and we're trying to deliver that with the current level of support teaching provision that we're given. So what we have asked for, like, as part of DES Plus, is we need humans, like we need bodies in our school to help these children and to tackle these problems. To give you a concrete example, let's say I have a boy who comes in the morning clinging to his mammy because he has experienced some kind of trauma early in his life, and he has now some kind of attachment that he doesn't want to leave his mammy. Well, the teacher can't spend 15 minutes, she has the rest of the class to take in. The SNA has medical care needs for children in the class that have to be looked at. We need X quotas of children on enrolment, teachers designated as trauma-informed practitioners or nurture practitioners who have the time to give that child in the morning, to make them feel safe. It's okay, Mammy will be back later on, to sit down with them, to have a talk with them, and then to bring them into the classroom space. So that requires funding for staff, that requires funding for the room, for what goes into the room, which is fairly basic. It's more what happens in the room, but it needs recognition and it needs funding. The second part of it then is, and it needs funding. The second part of it then is the multidisciplinary teams. So families and children that are living in the areas where our schools are, themselves have experienced, so parents, a higher level of trauma in their lives. There are more single mammies out there struggling to take care of 1, 2, 3 children. There are more mammies and daddies with additional needs themselves, looking after children with additional needs who need support. So the challenge that those families face is that they have been burned and let down so many times by the primary care system, and schools would have worked with those families. Let's submit an AON, let's refer to the CDNT, and they get a letter back within a couple of months or 6 months, and it says your child's on a waiting list and they don't hear anything again for 4 or 5 years. So the level of borderline disgust that's out there when you suggest to a parent that we use the public system as a means to support their child is really palpable. In schools like St. Dalton's or other model schools that are supported with charity, with private fundraising, that have the means and the capacity and have been really lucky to work so hard and to beg, borrow and steal to employ occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, counsellors on site, what you see is a far higher attendance rate because the families have trust in the school. Like, families come to us with their problems because they know the teacher, they know the principal, they know the secretary, they trust us, so they are far more likely to attend appointments for OT or SLT or counselling when they arise. If they aren't there, like I was chatting with Brendan earlier on, school staff, HSCLs can make contact, get down to the house, get them up there and get them in. So when the support is being provided, we are ensuring that children attend it. So it's about consistency. It's creating a place where all of these families feel like they can go to and they can have reliable support. And what we believe and what we really trust the benefit will ultimately is that you will have more children that have the capacity to be in class listening in junior infants and senior infants and first and second class when they're learning those early literacy, phonics, phonological awareness, when they're in maths with the specific maths recovery, the really well trained CPD we have around raising the level of maths and English in the schools. Those things can't work unless the basic care needs are taken care of. So having the multidisciplinary teams on site and the staffing and the support for trauma-informed and nurture practices would be two of the main things.
Great, thanks a million. Michael, a lot of your members teach in DESH schools, and again, I suppose, what are you hearing from them about DESH Plus? And what would you like to highlight?
Obviously they're waiting patiently for it and to see what additional investment is going to be made. I mean, I suppose people have touched on it. One of the things we'd love to see is a homeschool liaison in every school. And the fact that only certain schools qualify it, that makes a big difference. It makes a big difference at the start of a school year. We have homeschool liaison teachers now out in the community for the first week back, getting people back into school. That's seriously important, because if we don't get them back at the start of the year, they're not coming back. So that's the sort of thing that's one of the positive things about DESH, but not every school has homeschool liaison. And a lot of the things we've moved forward with have been very good, and we would be big supporters of DESH. But we would also have, when we meet our members, they'll be saying, we're not in a DESH area, nowhere near being in a DESH area, but we have what we would call DESH students. But we don't have the capacity to deal with them because we don't have the services. At post-primary level, there's also different strategic things happening. Even if students will say get appointments for NEPs or appointments for supports, they must leave the school. Now, I saw it myself even 20 years ago when these appointments are coming. But sir, I can't go, my mother wants me to go, but I've been picked for the first team. I want to, kids' priorities are not maybe going to the psychologists, it's the fact I've made it onto the school team, and they're on and there's no way you can change an appointment. So you've got these crises to the student. This is a massive thing. To the person that's visiting, you've got an appointment, you must take it. So we have all sorts of challenges in schools that sound very simple, but they all affect the students in the school. And going back to what people are having the therapies and the things in the school would make a huge difference. The rest of the OECD countries, nearly all, to a man, have that. What your model here is, Brendan, is exactly what every school in the country should have. And I know you're more than likely are going to say to me, it's not fully funded or you're not getting as much, but you've got more than what our schools have at post-primary level. So it should be more than a dream. It should be something that is just expected of people, because then we don't lose people along the way. And that's the problem. We are still losing people. For every ripple, as Micheál called it, that we have a success in, we're still losing people. And unless that investment, and it does come down, as Tanya said, to investment. We are not putting enough money into schools. And if we put money into schools, the payback is phenomenal. We sometimes forget that free secondary education, when I went to secondary school, was about 10 years old. Everybody will say that free secondary education is more than likely the building block of our economic success. Look what it paid for. You move on, and I started teaching in the early 90s after the dreadful 80s, which I was in school for, but I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad it was. My parents more than likely shielded me from it. But I went into a community school that had a pupil-teacher ratio of 16:1. So we had and we were the first school in the county to have a special class, right? That was back in the early 90s. So we had a special class with a very, very high level of support into it, but we were busing students for hours to the school. We had pupils arriving at 10 o'clock and leaving at 2 o'clock because that was the only way they could get home. So I come from that community school. Fast forward to that school now. That school now has 3 special classes with a very, very, not as much support as we had back in the early 90s, and we have a general allocation model of 19:1. What does 19:1 mean? It means that the majority of your classes, if you're supporting students, are going to be 30 in all the subjects you mean. That's what it boils down to. It boils down to practical classes having to have admissions policies for practical classes to say, we only have room for 24 people. 2 or 3 of you are not going to get in. That's what allocation models of that height have done to, in other words, it's restricting what we can offer students. So in the 80s, we could do 16:1 when we were a poor country. We're now a rich country and we're doing 19:1, which hasn't changed since 2009 when austerity came in. So we're still operating on an allocation model that is austerity based when they increased everything to 19:1. And we have the biggest class size in Europe. A simple thing to improve what we can do for students would be to reduce the allocation. So we have a better allocation model. Smaller classes make a big difference. Every OECD country that reduced classes, that's what happened. And if you want to develop second components of assessment, other forms of education in school, you cannot do it with classes of 30 plus. You have to have smaller classes so that there can be bespoke learning and bespoke teaching for students to be supported in this. And that's something that we have to start looking at. Senior cycle redevelopment has got money, but it's a pittance to what's needed if we're going to be serious about where we're going from.
Thanks, brilliant. Tanya, I'll go to you and then Conor, I'll come back to you. Just obviously the theme coming out repeatedly on resourcing, the lack of investment over time, which is shocking really. And then in the broader context of the RSI research this week, there have been wins though. So I'm going to ask you to articulate some of those wins that have created better outcomes for some, and then your ambition and your aspiration for this budget. Just to talk to us a little bit about that.
So I suppose the wins have been focused on meeting children's essential needs, because I suppose poverty starts with not having enough income. That's, of course, it leaves an effect and an impact on children and their families over time. But if you can start with dealing with children's essential needs, that can make a big difference. And I suppose where you see the change is the introduction of free school books and hot school meals, particularly at primary school level. It hasn't come across, hasn't been introduced across the board at second level. Why that's significant is those elements are actually the norm in most countries in Europe, actually. You will get a good hot school meal as part of your everyday educational experience, and you won't have to pay for school books. And that's something that advocates have been looking for a very long period of time. So we finally start seeing some traction in the last couple of years. And it has to be said, some of the investments made in early years do actually matter as well, because the inequalities are often baked in by the time children are at the age of 3. Of course, you can unbake them, it is possible, but the research shows that often you can predict where a child will go at the end of their educational experience based on their social and emotional behaviour at the age of 3. I think that's just shocking. And it's unacceptable, and that should not be the case. So the government did launch an Equal Start programme, which is essentially the equivalent of the DESH programme last year, but it's only started to fund that programme. But what you are hearing from services that got themselves into it, that finally they were able to break even, basically as a service. So a lot of those services struggling with the same issues that the DESH schools are struggling with, not having enough money to run all the different, like feed their children, have the ratio, a lower level ratio, and have those extra supports on the side, that that Equal Start programme has made a difference. And the extension of the DESH programme itself has been incredibly important as well. We saw the biggest extension of the DESH programme in 2022, but I suppose that's where it kind of stops really in terms of particular measures around class and inequality. And I've talked to officials about, about the pitching, about trying to get the resources needed, and it's been said to me, and I think I really agree with this, some of the things like free school books and hot school meals, they should have been seen as special initiatives actually, and separate to the ordinary running of the education system. The recommendation for those initiatives also came from the European Commission as well, because it was something they wanted to see happen across Europe. I think that has made a difference. So I don't know if we had looked at these kind of investments in the right way. Unfortunately, in the last budget, the free school books kind of mopped up a lot of the extra resources that should have gone to elsewhere within the education system. So where are we now? I think what's really important is the work that the advocates have done, the principals, organisations like the TUI, in educating the public on the importance of the DESH model and the need for further investment into DESH. Because I suppose one of the areas where you haven't seen change, and of course sometimes I'm loath to use this as a measurement, because education should be about every child getting to reach their full potential, no matter what that actually is. But we do use one of the indicators are, do you get to further education and university? And that's where the DESH programme hasn't been as successful actually. And the reason is the schools have not been enough resources to deal with the kind of inequalities that I just spoke about that have been baked in early on. And if I give an example of that, and it kind of follows on to this importance of care and dealing with children's social and emotional needs. The ESRI did a piece of work looking at 9-year-olds and growing up in Ireland, and what they found was if you lived through poverty as an infant up until by the age of 9, so that meant out of 3 out of 10 children would have a poor self-concept. Like a really important measurement, because it's telling you these are children that have no hope for their future. I mean, it's really hard to get your head around that a 9-year-old can think that they have no hope for their future. So the importance in focusing on just not only in children's essential needs, but also on the damage done by living through poverty, on their emotional needs. So the importance of nurture rooms, counselling on site, therapy on site, care, green spaces actually makes a big difference, and arts and culture and music, all of these things actually improve how children think and what's possible in their lives, and that's all really important. So the ambition would be for this budget is we hear something really significant on budget day, particularly around the DESH programme and the expansion of the DESH programme. I'd love to see, for example, I know that the ideas are still being worked on, a lot of consultations going on, the principals and other stakeholders are doing a lot of work and trying to shape what this programme looks like. And I have to say, one of the positive things that I have seen, particularly in the last 2 years, is the Department of Education has really ramped up the number of people working on this. Before I'd go to meetings, it was the same one official working on social inclusion, and social inclusion for everyone. What you see now is, you see in the Department of Education, there's a team of people working on this area who are very dedicated, but you also see work being done on the voice of children and young people as well in the Department of Education. So things seem to be happening in a way I haven't seen before. But the truth is in the pudding, as they say. We need to see the money. So we need to see the politicians decide. We're not going to opt for things like tax cuts. We're not going to opt for things like VAT cuts. We're actually going to put the money into what we know will deliver the best possible outcomes, and that's the education system.
Thanks, Tanya. Conor, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks, Denise. I just wanted to come in to disagree with Michael and Tanya for a bit of crack. Specifically when Michael talked about HSCLs for every school and when Tanya talked about the expansion of DESH, Johnny Giles used to say, if everyone's great, no one's great. And you can flip it the other way and say, if everyone's DESH, no one's DESH. And I think you're right, Tanya, we have to separate what DESH Plus could be. There's 3,500 primary schools in Ireland, another 500 or so secondary schools, so 4,000 schools. At the moment, 1,200 of those are designated as DESH, and as Brendan said earlier on, that universality has diluted down what the DESH programme is trying to do. When we are advocating for DESH Plus, we are advocating for probably less than 100 schools in small pockets of the country, in West Tala, in Jobstown, Darndale, Ballymun, in Limerick City, in Cork City. Of course, schools in general in Ireland can be more resourced, and there can be more investment in those schools. And of course, the stakeholders in those schools, the teachers and the parents, if they see something else in the education system, they're going to put their hand up and say, yeah, well, that's us, we need some of that. So there is space for, work on the identification model and how do we differentiate which school is DESH and which school isn't. But I think when we're talking about DESH Plus, we have to be so clear that this is a small number of schools from small pockets of really intergenerational poverty that need this support, and it is not something, and it's going to take, again, like I talked about earlier on, a bit of bravery from the politicians to say, no, this is not for everyone, unfortunately. Yeah, great. If we can deliver something else for everybody, let's do it. But let's not do it under the umbrella of DESH, because if we dilute it down, it becomes less focused and less effective.
Great, thanks a million. You weren't looking for a right of reply, Michael, are you?
Right of
Short
reply.
right of reply.
Short right of reply. We've got to be ambitious. No offence, Conor, we've got to be ambitious. All the schools, the 735 schools, the 3,000, need to be DESH. And then the ones who have that extra disadvantage need to be DESH plus, not DESH plus. So what we need is everybody to be DESH and then build on top of that. So let's be ambitious, not say, let's keep DESH to just the DESH schools. Let's say every school needs DESH, every school needs homeschool liaison, every school needs the lower pupil-teacher ratios, and then let's look at the schools that need more than that again. So I'm not talking about DESH plus, I'm talking about DESH plus, hopefully, in the end. No offence, Conor.
Okay, and I think agreement in both, actually, that the standard needs to be raised. We need to really look after those that need it most, but we should have ambition around those standards and then really target.
Our call with this budget is the government selects 10 sites basically and goes for the DESH plus model, whatever that looks like in the end. But they need money in this year's budget if they're going to roll it out next year, is the truth. If they roll it out in September next year, they have to have money to do that.
Allocated, yeah. Great. Brendan, you want to come in? Can somebody, chair mic there? And then I'm going to go to the floor, so give people a chance to comment, have questions, and you're not getting out for another half an hour for your lunch. No such thing as a free lunch, so I'm just giving you a heads up. Brendan.
Yeah, no, I just didn't want people to leave in any way confused today about St. Ultan's. We're kind of accused in the past, we're very, very good at putting our best foot forward, and we do lots of great things, but we really struggle. We do all of that against the odds, and I like, as the person accused people of being negative in the past, I like to celebrate the positives, but our reality is we are doing these things against all the odds. We work in a multidisciplinary fashion. I don't want people either to be confused that we are a multidisciplinary team in the way maybe that people might understand with the CDNT and organisations like that. I suppose the big pressures that we have in St. Ultan's on a daily basis, number one is very straightforward. We run our school at a deficit annually, so we are losing money every single year, and that is the reality. The second is the bottleneck to education, that is the provision of special education. So we're identifying children who have needs, and then we're adding them to the waiting list that you mentioned earlier, Conor, and it's not good enough. We need that multidisciplinary team on site. St. Ultan's work with the Cherry Orchard Implementation Board, it's been identified by our education subgroup as one of the main needs for this area. People trust St. Ultan's. This is a hub for the community. People attend appointments in St. Ultan's. It's been proven. We have a proven track record with our play therapy and with our speech and language therapy appointments. We know when we've met with the HSE in the past, they've shared with us their number of missed appointments, and I don't have the exact figures, but in around 50% of appointments are being missed, which is a massive, massive waste of people's time, energy and resources. And we are saying we have a proven track record that our attendance rates are 98%. Why? Because the children are generally here. As you said, Conor, if they're not here, we'll get them here. So we can do that. And I know that within the HSE that the voice is changing. There are people within the HSE who recognise that, and recognise that maybe the primary care centre is only down the road. Well, so are the schools in Ballyfermot, only down the road, and we've proven that we were able to be part of the solution there, and we'd love to be part of the solution with multidisciplinary teams and addressing the needs of all of the children in Cherry Orchard and for other places to do the same in their areas.
Thanks a million. Okay, I'm going to go to the floor. Are there any questions or comments that you'd like to add? Andy.
Hi, Sue is my name. I'm one of the campus managers here with Brendan in St. Ultan's. I'm delighted, Brendan, you jumped back in there, because St Dalton's doesn't get anything more than any other DEIS school. We don't get any extra resources. We used to have a walk-in deputy to help us develop the model of ICE, and that disappeared about 2 or 3 years ago. So we're hoping to get that back. I was just talking to Michal earlier on about that one. And my job, I'm development and campus manager here, and we need my role, not me, but we need my role, because my role is fundraising. We have a private company, Smurfits, I'll tell you who they are because we're proud of them, fund our play therapy, do it for 2 years. We don't know where we're getting the funding for that after 2 years. Our Presto music project you heard there earlier on was funded by the Lawrenson Foundation Trust. The trust is now gone. We're funded till June next year. We don't know where we're getting the money now for Presto after that. So important. And Presto is based on a programme called El Sistema, which is building communities through music. A really good programme. We don't know where we're getting the money for that. That's my job to try and find money for that. Might be talking to you later on, Denise, about that one, Community Foundation. We have Thornton's Recycle. They fund one of our children every year. You know, so we're constantly fundraising. My job every day is fundraising to do all of the extra bits that we do here, all the care service. The Department of Children are good. They fund us, a huge amount, but it doesn't completely cover what we need. So I just think, as Brendan said, not to walk away today thinking St Dalton's, is we are the model. We are a working model. It's really effective. We've been onto the department, as Michal said, many times. We've had different people coming out. We drag people out here by the skin, because until you actually come here, like our children that were up there singing this morning, they're so amazing. They have so much potential. We talked about generational disadvantage earlier on. A lot of our children are facing generational disadvantage. I'm going to tell you this because I asked our parent and she said it was okay to share it with you. One of our parents that did our tea this morning was taking phone calls while she was making the tea for us this morning, trying to get housing, because she's in a family hub. Like, they're the kind of things that we're facing here on a daily basis. It's not just getting the children through the door, not just getting the children into the classroom. It's a huge amount more. We're responding to the needs of Cherry Orchard. And Conor, delighted to meet you today as well, because I know you're doing amazing work, all the schools together, and St Dalton's obviously will be certainly part of, hopefully, whatever DEIS Plus is happening. So I just wanted to get that message across that, that's where we're at. So I hope the department can look at changing how they do things, be broad-minded. And ideally, we'd like to be part of whatever the negotiations are as well. We have a lot of learning that we can share with everybody. So,
Thanks a million, Sue, for that brilliant contribution. I'm actually going to go back to Michal now because he has to go. So I'm going to give you a chance to respond to anything you've heard.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, unfortunately, I actually have a meeting kind of related to this that I really don't want to put off because we are trying to keep the momentum going on it. And look, thanks, Sue, and I'll take up that offer. I'll be probably talking to you in the next week or so too. Look, I suppose the discussion has been really good. I've a lot written down here, and I've written down here to balance priorities. So it's looking, I suppose, the piece that I suppose that Conor and I might moderate slightly between Conor and Michael. As we look, I suppose, in the DEIS plan, we are looking both at making sure we're supporting those schools with the highest concentration disadvantage, but also looking across the system to ensure that every child is supported to achieve their potential. And they're kind of, I suppose, that's how we're going to look into the next 10 years or so in terms of that strategy, I suppose, and that's the piece we're going to build towards. The multidisciplinary teams piece, and it is a piece as I mentioned before, we have an interdepartmental working group which does include one of the deputy CMOs who we are kind of discussing how this works into the future. It's a difficult piece, I suppose, in terms of people and resources. Internally in the department, obviously, we have launched the education therapy service, which begins in special schools, but it is our ambition that it will roll out beyond that, and I've made sure that we'll be looking at DEIS Plus as early as possible in the mainstream piece of that, because I think that's really key to that. And I think as we kind of work on towards that, we'll be looking at what are the needs and what maybe needs, I suppose, can potentially be added to that if, again, we always come back to resources. And unfortunately, I think, Tanya, if you were deeper right sound, my job would be a lot easier. We'd be fine. There's a lot I've kind of taken down here. One other piece I think there as well that has come through, I think, particularly from Brendan and Conor, is the idea of needing the space and time for the teaching and learning, for the innovation, the bespoke responses, that's something that has come through a lot in the work we've done. That it's not a cookie cutter piece that what happens works here, works everywhere else. There are different levels of needs in different areas, different types of needs, and schools need the space and time and resources to be able to adapt to that and use the creativity that is in all those DESH schools. And that's something we are looking at within the DESH programme, and also as we move out into the DESH plan. And then particularly that teaching and learning piece, which I suppose can't be lost in the midst of all the other needs. And it is important that we make sure that we continue to set high ambitions, like really tap into the huge potential that's there. One of the big things that has come back on the children and young people consultations we've had is how much the children in these schools really want to learn something new, and want to kind of have people feel that they can learn and achieve. And it's pretty clear that it happens here. It's purely obvious, and I think that's something we need to make sure is carried through into DESH Plus, and make sure that the schools have time to do that. I think I'm going to have to finish on that as time is there already. But I will be around at lunch if people want to collar me and back with me a question. I'm sure Sue will catch me again for the Deputy Principal question. All right, thanks very much for everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, thanks a million, Micheál. And it is so important to have the department here, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. Okay, back to the floor. Any comments or questions from anybody? Okay, we have two here.
Hi everyone, Dara Hennessy, Citywise Education. We're a youth and education organisation based out in Jobstown and Tallaght. My question was kind of more for Micheál, but maybe someone might have some insights. But it's just around, I suppose, do we see that there's a role for the community and voluntary sector to play in a kind of DESH Plus model? What we do out in Tallaght is really supporting the work that's been done in schools. And people who've heard me speak before will know I have a bit of a hobby horse about kind of asking too much of schools, because when they close in the summer, like what do all the kids do if you put all the resources into schools? So I just suppose get the thoughts from the panel.
Great, thanks, Billy. I'm going to take a few and then I'll come back.
Hi, my name is Fiona Carney. I'm the CEO of Family Base. I'm also a member of the subgroup of the Cherry Orchard Implementation Board, the education pillar. And like Brendan said, we're really, really keen. Our main objective is a multidisciplinary team in St. Ultan's, but I think we also, and this is what's really important to me, in and around a school. We have to just keep thinking around the school as well, because when we're talking about it, and it's back to that early intervention piece, it's about the early years service that feed the junior infants in St. Ultan's School, because like that, age 3, you know, we have an early years service as part of our service, and I think we have 40% of our children on waiting lists. In another community, that would, them parents would pay for that therapy, they'd pay for them assessments. So already at 2 and 3, they're at a disadvantage just because of resources, just because of the waiting lists in our community. So how that shows up in a school or in an early years service is through behaviour. And what's happening to these children is either we're working really hard in the services to try and retain the children, support the children, give them the best experience, but lots of these children and lots of these parents are worn out and they're giving up, and they don't want to bring the child into the service because they're worried, and they don't want to bring the child into school, so it's having a massive impact. So we're trying to run lots of programs. We mentioned Equal Start. It has been helpful, it has been beneficial, but it's only going so far. We're running our talk booths, we're running our TerraPlay, all of them, and they will deal to a degree with some of the speech and language delays, with some of the social and emotional issues or delays or impacts. But we need the therapies, we need the interventions, the one-to-one interventions. So I think when we're talking about these models and we're advocating for 10 sites, I'm totally in agreement with that. I don't want us to sprinkle this bit of money too far that we make no impact. Let's make an impact on 10 sites, show the impact. Each of them schools that we target as part of the 10, who are their feed our early year services, because there'd be enough resource, hopefully, to target the 3 and 4 year olds in them services and ensure by the time they get to junior, they've had their blocks of therapy. They're able to talk, they're able to sit down, share all of the skills that we want the children to be able to have when they start school, and make them transitions easier for children. So just wanted to make that.
Great, thanks a million. And yeah, there we go.
Hi, my name is Katrina. I'm a junior infant teacher here in St Dalton's. And I just wanted to add on to kind of what Conor was saying there about us. I know that the DESH programme allows for more teachers in DESH schools, but it doesn't acknowledge the work of the SNAs. We have one SNA allocation for all the schools across the country. You have what you have, and there's nothing you can do about it, really. And I think we're not regarding the work that the SNAs are doing in the classes every day. Every DESH classroom needs an SNA in the room. When I welcome my kids in the morning, some of them mightn't have had a breakfast. Some of them have had to take 2 buses to get here because they are in a homeless accommodation across the city. Some of them have witnessed things in the morning that has led to trauma. Okay, the stuff that is coming into our classrooms, and I can't take a child outside the room because I have 16 other junior infant kids that I need to work with, and once I leave the classroom, chaos will erupt. And my SNA does that, and that's not part of their care needs. And we're not acknowledging that that is a huge part of the absolutely incredible work that they are doing. So my SNA needs to do that it mightn't be on the list of stuff that they should be doing. But then I also have a child in my class who needs one-to-one SNA care. So when she takes that other child out of the room to dry them up, to give them a little bit of toast, to calm them down, the child that's in my room who needs one-to-one care is suffering. So I feel like we need an SNA in every single classroom, and then specific children need one-to-one SNA support as well. I feel like our SNA allocation is not hitting enough kids at all, and that's something that I think should be part of our DESH Plus programme, that every DESH classroom has an SNA, and that then specific children also get one-to-one SNA support. And if that means we have 2 SNAs in one classroom, then that's what we need.
Yeah. Great, thanks a million, really clear, great contribution. Gentleman down the back.
Hi, my name is Conor Keane. I am the Head of Communications for Alcohol Action Ireland. So while not directly involved in education, I can see the scale. It's opening my eyes to the scale of what you guys are doing. One of the initiatives we have in Alcohol Action Ireland is called Silent Voices. It's about raising awareness about parental problem alcohol use in home, which obviously has a knock-on effect for children. And we've done some research and reports into the interconnection between alcohol and domestic violence. So one of the initiatives we have been advocating for and trying to get contact with government about for the last 5 years at this stage is a thing called Operation Encompass, which if it's in Northern Ireland, it's in the UK since 2023, and if it was brought into Ireland, it would facilitate an information sharing ability between Gardaí when they're called to a house with over domestic violence, when there has been a child present, and then allowing them by the next day to have informed that child's school that they have been to an incident, which would then allow the school to offer immediate support to that child when they come in, be it through a trained teacher or whatever. Now, this does have a lot of support. People have come out and said they have it. Children's Ombudsman, TUSLA, all these guys, but it's sort of fallen off the radar. There's been a few false dawns with it. Our understanding is that there has to be a change in legislation through the Department of Justice, which we've been sort of advocating for. But in November, we are going to try to hype this up through our Silent Voices initiative. We have an End the Silence Week, which tries to raise awareness about parental problem alcohol use, and this year we are focusing about intergenerational trauma, and I would just like to get specifically from the people on the front line, the 2 principals, your views in particular about such a scheme. Would it be helpful for the children? Would it be how you guys, it would impact you guys? And basically that's just it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a million. Any other comments or questions before I go back to the panel? No? Okay. Sorry, one more. Yeah, at the back.
Hi, I'm Claire Garvey from the Irish National Teachers Organisation. I think probably the most depressing thing I heard today was someone who said, my job is fundraising. I mean, I think that the importance of actually funding our education system at all levels, whether it is DESH plus, DESH plus, primary, secondary, is absolutely fundamental. I think that we have about 1,200 schools in the DESH programme, 600 at DESH Band 1. We need at least 100 of the schools that are in the areas of the highest socioeconomic deprivation in a DESH Plus scheme as soon as possible, and I really hope that that scheme will be up and running shortly. It's all about creating the conditions for learning. It would have started with breakfast clubs, went on to hot school meals, the free school books. Now what we need is not pilot schemes and not dreams, but baked in therapeutic service, the multidisciplinary teams, counselling, the children who are coming with the adverse childhood experiences in the morning. We have pilots. It needs to be more than pilots. I'm very wary of pilots, because pilots can run for a while and then they sometimes disappear, or then there's a 2-year review or whatever. We need it in, and we need it in the scheme, and we need it baked in. Without pitching schools against each other, I would just say that 20% of children from families, the universal supports, it is absolutely huge. Also, of course, there's the issue of stigma and that. So the universality of the free book scheme and the hot meal scheme, that is very, very important. The inequality has to be tackled. The volunteerism, this voluntary contributions, it needs to go. It is just unequivocal. Schools need to be funded to run. And certainly in the INTO, in our budget campaign this year, we put a figure on it, and it was that the capitation needs to increase by €75 per pupil per year, and that would just be a basic.
Great, thank you very much. Deputy Jennifer Cummins, you're very welcome. As everybody knows, Jennifer is the deputy, is the educational spokesperson for SOCDEMS. So you'll have a chance to contribute if you want, but I'll go back to the panel. So I'm going to just ask the panel, I suppose, to make a final comment-ish. There's been a couple of very specific things raised, city-wise, and the role of that, I suppose, within the DESH context. Very passionate plea for SNA, which I totally would affirm, and I'm sure the others would, and a couple of other very specific universal versus targeted. So I will start this end of the table, and we'll work our way down. So now's your chance to say whatever burning issue you didn't get to earlier on.
No, absolutely, and I think that's going to be the challenges you're talking about, the universal versus the targeted approaches, but we have to look at the realities. You know, there are schools in this city that don't have to worry about money. It's as simple as that, and from the principals that I'm interacting with and working with, it takes up so much time, energy and headspace for them, their other school leaders. It trickles down into the day-to-day working of our educators, who are fantastically dedicated people who we have to say no to for certain things, which is a no culture, which we have to avoid at all costs, to allow our educators to do the job that they're so skilled at. Let us do what we do, which is educate. Let us care for the children. That's what we do. We're really, really good at it. You're absolutely right. We shouldn't be fundraisers. We shouldn't be begging. We should be funded and allowed to do the work that we know we can do.
Yeah, so I suppose on the community voluntary sector that Dara brought up, there's absolutely a role for those organisations to play in DESH schools. I think, like Dara said, though, in schools anyway, we don't have the human to be the liaison between the school and all of those good organisations in the community that are doing that work. We're either relying on an outside organisation to be the organiser, or sometimes the HSEL, which can sometimes be called the homeschool community liaison, is trying to double, triple job and be the person that interacts with them. One of the pilots that's going on at the moment is called the City Connects program. It operates in the Northeast Inner City. That is a subsidiary of TESS, where you have teachers seconded from their schools, 5 teachers along with a coordinator, and they have a profile of every single child within the 10 schools within that pilot project. Every single child's interests are listed, profiles built up of them, and then that City Connects worker with the schools to make sure that they're delivering in-school programs and extracurricular and after-school activities that suit the children within their school. So again, absolutely, and we need the bodies. And then the other one I wanted to just mention was talking about the school and everything around it, like the early years service. I think that is 100% true. Like, it has to come from the early years. Even, like Brendan, I'm sure is the same. Within my school, I can see the difference between children who attend early